We're going to split lesson 03 into 2 days. Today we're going to focus on just adding and subtracting of integers, examples 1 through 3. If you remember from last lesson, integers are whole numbers and their opposites. We're going to be adding and subtracting them today. We're going to start with adding using a number line. For -1 plus -4, I'm going to start at 0 and I'm going to move to -1 on my number line. Since I'm adding a -4 to -1, I'm going to move in a negative direction 4 more units to the left, and I end up on -5. In this next example, I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to move to -2, and then from there I'm going to add a +3. Since I'm adding a +3, I'm going to move in a positive direction 3 places to the right, and I land on 1. Now with larger numbers, using a number line would be sort of a pain, so instead we can use some rules. If the two numbers have the same sign, like in our first example, you just add the two numbers and keep the sign. So for 2 plus 3, they're both the same sign. We're going to add them and keep the sign the same. For -2 plus -3, they're both the same sign. Add them, keep the sign. If our two signs are different, like in this example up here, you're not going to add the two numbers, you're actually going to subtract them. The big one minus the small one. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then you're going to take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. The absolute value of a number, remember, is the distance it is from 0. So that's the technical definition. Most kids just say, they look at the two numbers, whichever one is bigger when you ignore the sign, that's the one that you're going to keep the sign of. This one, either way, actually, in this case, is the bigger number, so you are going to keep the sign and it's positive. Down here, with -7 plus 3, they're different signs, so you're going to subtract or find the difference between those two numbers, and you're going to keep the sign of the one that has the greatest absolute value. Or if you ignore the sign, you want the larger number. So 7 is bigger than 3 and it's negative, so my answer is negative. In the last example, 7 plus -3, you have different signs again, so you're going to subtract 7, take away 3, which is 4. This time, our larger number is positive, so our answer is +4. The last thing that we're going to do today is subtract integers. With subtracting integers, you're going to change all of the subtraction problems to addition and then follow the addition rules that were on the previous page. When you change it to addition, you're changing it to adding the opposite. So you're changing the subtraction to an add, and you're changing the second number to its opposite. I sometimes call it chop chop or chop minus. That's just to help you know that you're making 2 marks on your paper. You're either going to go chop, chop, you're going to change the subtraction. Let me grab a different color here. You're going to change the subtraction of a negative to adding the opposite. Chop, chop. Or in a case where you're subtracting a positive number, if you're subtracting a positive number, you're going to say chop minus. You're going to change the subtraction to a negative. For example, -7 take away 3. Whenever I come across subtraction with negatives, I go ahead and change it to addition by going either chop chop or chop minus. In this problem, it's going to be chop minus. Add the opposite. You never touch this first number. Some kids want to try and go chop chop or chop chop. You do not touch the first number. It's always the number after the subtraction sign. Now, once I change that to adding the opposite, or chop minus, it ends up being 2 with the same sign, so you're going to add them together. 7 plus 3 is 10, and keep the sign. think about it this way. If you lost $7 and then lost $3 more, you've now lost $10. In the next example, 7 minus a negative 3, we're going to change it to adding the opposite. Chop, chop. Now I have 7 plus a positive 3. 7 plus 3, we could go back to elementary school and know the answer to that is 10. Now our last example, 3 minus 7. I don't see any negatives in my problem, but this is one of those problems where you're taking away a bigger number from a smaller number. And what happens then is you end up negative. If you're starting at 3 on a number line and you take away 7, you're going to end up to the left of 0. It's going to be negative. Or you just change it when you have a situation like this with a big number being taken away from a smaller number. Change it to adding the opposite, or chop minus. And now they're different signs. You're going to actually subtract the two numbers, and then you're going to take the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value, or the biggest number ignoring the sign, and then you're going to keep that sign. So it's -4.